Hello and very welcome to my half-year check-in. I can't believe that I've already been doing this for half a year now, so I wanted to take a few minutes to see how this time has been and what my favorites from these last months are. So get ready for my goal progress, my best reads of 2026 so far, and my reading stats for the last 6 months. First off though, while I set up the spread overall, I want to say thank you for all of you regular watchers. I really appreciate that you keep showing up and that you're part of my reading journal journey on here. In the last few weeks, my channel has grown a bit more and I'm really happy to see it. I hope we can get some more conversations going in the comments and maybe build a nice little journaling and reading community here. If you have anything else you would like to see or anything you want to see more of, please let me know in the comments and I'll try my best. I'm excited to let you know that I have started to also write shorter stories again. So managing writing and getting back into the habit is one area that I want to talk about more in the coming weeks, especially since I have so much great input from Eurocon to share with all of you. But that's a topic for another day, so let me get back to my halfway check-in and let's get started on the first part. I have set up this spread in 3 different categories. First of all, I want to talk about my goal progress of all the goals that I set for myself early in this year. Then I want to head over to the best reads that I've had so far and tell you about those. And finally, I want to share a few reading stats of how much I tend to read each month so far. So let's get started with the goal progress. Of course, I will have to set up this area first, and I want to look at all the different goals that I set for myself and how far I've gotten in them. So I've calculated the percentages for each of them, and then I can see if I'm getting on well with those goals or not. So let's just go through them. My first goal overall is to read 60 books in this year, because I think that's a nice number. And I'm doing great so far. I am standing at 32 of the 60, so that's 53%, and that's brilliant for the halfway there, because it means that I've chosen a great number. I'm not reading way more and I'm not reading way less, and I'm quite happy with that. Next up, we have the priority reads. Those were 10 books that I chose at the beginning of the year and that I really wanted to get around to this year. Unfortunately, as it usually goes with this type of reading list, I haven't gotten quite that far. I've only read 2 of the 10 so far, so that's only 20%, and I really have to take note and try to read more of those books quite soon, or I won't be able to finish them this year. But back to nicer goals. I've also set up 2 bingo pages for myself. The first one is an overall book bingo that's more about the diversity of books. And in that one, I have already completed 20 of 25 boxes. So that means I'm 80% done. And even though filling the last boxes is always a bit harder than filling the first ones, I'm pretty sure that I will be able to finish this one in time. Same for the theme bingo, my second one, where I focused more on elements that appear in the books. And I have 19 out of 25 for that one, so more than 3/4, and that's doing really well as well. Then of course we have my alphabet challenges. In terms of the author alphabet, I'm currently at 18 of 26 author names, which is almost 70%, so not doing too bad. And in terms of the title alphabet, I'm at 20 of 26, which is again about 3/4 of the way there. I'm not quite sure if I will actually be able to complete them because I'm not going to go out of my way to buy books just to reach the alphabet, but I think I'm doing really well in terms of getting all kinds of different names and titles in my reading in here. With that said, I have one more challenge that I added a bit later on and that I want to put in here as well, and that is the R Fantasy Bingo board. That only started in April, so I don't have to be halfway in this one because, of course, it's only 1/4 of the way done. And so far, I've read 5 of the 25 books for that one, which is 20%, which is a bit less than 1/4 of the way there. But I think a lot of the books that I need for this one will be coming quite soon, so I'm not too worried about this goal so far. And yeah, that's the goal progress done for all the goals that I set up in the beginning of the year, or still quite early in the year. So let's head on to the next part. And that is the one about the best reads. I thought about talking about my top 5 books of the first half of the year, but that's actually not that easy because a lot of the things that I really enjoyed are series. And so I figured I wanted to give myself more options to talk about them and not be really restricted on picking a single book in each case. So that's why we're going to talk about a few series and 2 single books, and I will basically nominate them for different things that I really enjoyed about them. I hope you enjoy this style of doing this. Let me know. Anyway, first up we have the Shades of Magic series, which is started by A Darker Shade of Magic by B.E. Schwab, and that is by far the coolest fantasy world and the coolest setting and the coolest magic system that I read this year. So I really enjoyed the whole trilogy, and I do know that there is a second trilogy, I believe, that continues after that first one, and I really want to read that at some point. But just as it is, this is one of the best trilogies that I read, and I highly recommend it if you're interested in high fantasy. Next up, we have the Temeraire series, and if you've been around here for any amount of time, then you surely have heard me talk about this amazing dragon that I love in this book series. It starts out with My Majesty's Dragon by Naomi Novik, and that is such a great series in terms of just having nice different adventures, traveling the world, and having the best non-quite human friendship overall between the captain and the dragon. And I love this series. It's 9 books long, so I'm not quite done yet, but I have the next few books on my shelf and I will definitely be going into them very soon. The first series that I want to talk about is the Murderbot series, and that one just counts as a great sci-fi story in my book, with one of the coolest protagonists that I've ever seen in that genre. The Murderbot series starts with All Systems Red by Martha Wells, and it is a really interesting type of storytelling from the perspective of a construct rather than a human. And so far all the books that I've read are novellas, so it's also really quick to read, but the waiting times at my library are incredibly long, so I'm still waiting to continue the series further. And then we also have 2 single books that I want to mention here. The first one is Dear Missing Friend by Susan McGurk, which is actually a very new book that I got as an advanced reader's copy. And this book is completely written in letters in a time where that makes a lot of sense, because it's a historical novel and it talks about emigrating from Ireland to the US. And it is quite an interesting concept to read and a very nice story. So if that sounds interesting, do check out my video on it as well. And finally, I also want to mention the most impactful nonfiction book that I read this year, and that is Unmasking AI by Dr. Joy Buolamwini. And basically that was a book that really showed me a lot more about the biases that AI can have, and that really helped me get a great perspective into that. And it's written in such a way that you can read it even if you don't know anything about AI or don't know much about it. And it's a mixture between a memoir and a real factual nonfiction book, so it's quite nice to read, and I absolutely recommend it to anyone that is worried a bit about where our AI-focused world is heading at the moment. But yeah, that's all the best reads that I have prepared for now, so I hope there's something that sounds interesting to you. Please do let me know what your best reads were so far, and if you have any recommendations for me based on these ones that I just told you about. But also, let's head over and let's get into my reading stats that I have prepared based on the last 6 months. I will go through a few different numbers here, but I don't plan on doing any really elaborate graphs or anything. I will keep that for the end of the year because I think it's already quite nice to just have a nice little overview, and I don't need a graphic composition of everything for half of the year. With that said, let's get into the numbers. First off, let's talk about the books that I read. Of course, they were quite a combination of different things. So I read 5 books that have been on my TBR for a while, and 7 that I recently bought and that I also have as a physical book at home. I also read 18 unowned books because I do read quite a lot from the library. I reread 2 books of my own, and I also annotated 2 books. Furthermore, I read a total of 6 magazines, and that's all of my reading so far. Then I do have my little collection pages in the front, and I've set up 2 parts on there that are quite interesting to me as well. So in terms of countries that I read from, that is mostly different authors that come from these countries. I have 7 different countries so far, which is still too little. I want to have more, and I'm working on having more in the beginning of July already, so we're getting there. And also, of course, I have all the different animals that I read about, that I painted and that I put in there, and I have 8 of those so far, so that's also not looking too bad. Next up, let's talk about series. I did quite a lot of series reading in the last half year. I continued 3 of my series and finished 2, which is great. But I've also started 5 new ones, which feels like quite a lot. But then again, I do read quite a lot of series and genres that have a lot of series. So what am I supposed to do? Anyway, I think I'm doing okay on series and I'll get through them eventually, I'm sure. So next up are my monthly averages. I read an average of 5.3 books each month and 1 magazine. That was quite simple. And that made up about 1,600 pages each single month. Now that might not sound like that much, but I think it's quite a good amount and I like how it's going. Since I don't listen to audiobooks that much, I have less than 9 hours listened to each month, but that's also quite okay for me. Maybe I want to see if I can do a little bit more for the rest of the year, but we'll just have to see. And finally, in terms of the type of book that I read so far, 12 of the books that I read were physical books, 15 were ebooks, and 6 were audiobooks. Just like the magazines, I tend to have 1 audiobook per month. And yeah, those are all the stats that I've prepared to share with you. Now let me make this spread a bit more beautiful with some stamps still. I will say that I had a great reading year so far, and it is really fun to share my experiences and reflections with someone, so I definitely want to continue this channel. I think I'm doing quite well with my own goals so far, but I do realize that I will have to focus more on my priority reads, and I also really need to look into picking books for all the reading challenges that I'm doing now, since I've joined quite a few. Luckily, they will often combine to count for multiple prompts and multiple challenges, and that will help me to hopefully get through all of them. For July, I have already picked out a few interesting reads that might even fit into all 3 challenges. My own summer reading challenge, the R Fantasy bingo board, and of course the hardest reading challenge you'll ever do. Even though I'll do it in the Ain't Nobody Got Time for That version, which I can finally take part in. I've linked the videos for all 3 challenges for you, just in case you missed them, and soon I'll have my next challenge update video ready as well. So you can look forward to that. But that's enough of me talking. I hope you enjoyed this look at my progress and stats so far. It definitely was fun to set this up. And with that said, thanks for watching, have a great rest of your day, and go read something nice.